back with more of a Tuesday edition of Southern Fried Sports right here on Tide 102.9 and 100.9 FM. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, with you each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon. And after a week's break with Cecil Hurt, who was down at SEC spring meetings in Destin, Florida, last week at this time, we're rejoined by Cecil right now. Cecil Hurt of the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com. Cecil, it's a bongos theme for today's playlist, and that guy right there needs no introduction, right?
Well, Carlos doesn't. I guess that's Greg Rowley playing the congas and the bongos for Black Magic Woman era Santana. It's a little hard to sometimes tell whether it's a bongo or a conga. But yeah, there's some classic bongo playing out there. The first one I think of would be "Sympathy for the Devil," and that in that intro, which is actually Brian Jones, who they were kind of having, Brian would show up in the studio, and bongos were kind of a safe alternative for Brian, who was a great musician. Brian was one of those natural pick it up and I can play it musicians. But keeping it together for a 3 or 4 minute song on a guitar, Brian had kind of moved past that in some way. But that you listen to that intro to "Sympathy for the Devil," that's Brian Jones. The other person that again, in keeping with the long-time theme of your show and Southern band, Cindy Wilson from the B-52s plays bongos on a lot of songs. A little bit of their retro hippie feel with the B-52s, but Planet Claire, that's her on the bongo. So it's a fascinating little instrument. A lot of hippie jam bands dancing around Woodstock with a pair of bongos.
"Sympathy for the Devil" definitely made the list today. I can tell you that. Absolutely. If you're going to do a top 3 of bongo-centric type cuts in rock and roll history or music of any kind, you're right. I think "Sympathy" has to be on that list. Cecil, the last we spoke, we were interested in your trip to the SEC spring meetings. We outlined the Will Wade situation, the embattled LSU basketball coach, at least embattled everywhere outside of Baton Rouge, it seems like. You were there when Will Wade met with the media for the first time, I believe, since March 7th. It was like right. Puxatawny Phil came out, in Destin, Florida, and Will Wade. Did we learn anything, Cecil, from that gathering with Will Wade?
Not really. He I think they felt like it was time for him to get out front of some things. There's some national guys. He did one session with all of us in the theater, which is the main room down in Destin, and then he did, I think, a sit down with the LSU beat people who were there. Scott Rabelais, Amy Just, and Glenn Gilbo, and answered more LSU-specific questions. So I don't think. Again, it depends on your perspective, and I think LSU fans are all in with Will Wade, but I don't think he overwhelmed anybody else in the room. Not just some non-answers to some questions, but with the body language and so forth. But again, time will tell. And I talked to Greg Sankey, asked him at one of his sessions, about a timetable for that, and I think there are a lot of people who feel like if they kick the can down the road far enough, that this is all going to going to go away, even at LSU, much less at other places.
Is that the sense you get at the conference level right now, Cecil, or is that still to be determined in your opinion?
I think there's a little frustration, but at the conference level, but they're like everybody. It's really an NCAA matter, and they're torn. As a conference, you don't want to be prodding the NCAA to sanction your members. But at the same time, I think that, and this is my opinion, this is not something I was told, but I think that the league office and Greg Sankey is getting, some feedback on hey, what's the situation. And again, LSU's is a little different. There are several schools out there. Auburn would be one. LSU would be one. Well, LSU wouldn't be one. Arizona would be one. Southern Cal. Everywhere where there's an assistant that you can hang everything on the assistant, like Book Richardson at Arizona, who was involved in recruiting Jahvon Quinerly when he committed out there. Everything that you can put on an assistant coach, I think those institutions are going to try to do that. The problem LSU has is it's not an assistant coach, it's the head coach. So it's going to be interesting to see. And again, people are just waiting to see. There's a question, for people who watch the NCAA in a broader sense, as I've done for far too many years. How accountable our head coach is going to be? How accountable is Bruce Pearl for Chuck Person? How accountable is Sean Miller for Book Richardson? So that's a question that remains to be answered. Nobody knows the answer, and it'll be interesting to see. But before you know it, Travis, we're going to have another college basketball season, and everybody that's involved in this is either going to be gone from a player standpoint, or if they're coaches, if they're Will Wade, they'll have made. What if it's 3 years down the road? He will have made $9 million that he's stick in the bank, and then let the chips fall where they may.
And not only that, Cecil, players that maybe or have been implicated to some extent in all of this are coming back to school to play another year, Cecil.
There are some. And again, that's a lot of it is who you believe, and a lot of names got thrown around, and Colin, who's not coming back to school, Colin Sexton said it didn't happen, and who do you believe, and what evidence is there, and that's true at Auburn, it's true at Arizona. Again, Jahvon Quinerly just transferred in from Villanova. His name was involved. Now, I'm sure that Nate Oates feels like he's clear. Feels like that he's good to go, and believes the Quinerly family's version of events, which is going to put it all on Book Richardson. And I certainly can't dispute that. That's for the people who make these decisions to make. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of people whose names have come up. At Kansas, their guy's been reinstated. So there's going to be several playing. And I know that people around here look at the players at Auburn or the players at LSU, but there's at least peripheral involvement at South Carolina been mentioned, Texas A&M's been mentioned, Clemson's been mentioned, Duke's been mentioned. So we'll just have to see. Zion's not coming back, though.
Is it just a situation that's too massive and cumbersome for the NCAA to get its arms around? That it's not staffed in a way that you think it might be able to handle it, or is it just, as you alluded to, something that more than anything it just hopes will fade from the public consciousness here in the next year or so?
Well, I will say I don't think the NCAA was anticipating this. Whether they have enough staff to deal with it, we'll see. And their argument has been that they wanted to wait and see what came out in the trials. Well, the trials are essentially done. Everybody's plea bargained out and said what they're going to say. So it's really time for them to act. Now, whether they will, whether they can, whether some of these schools are whether Arizona and Kansas are too big to fail, we'll just have to see. And again, it's not. I'm not picking out any schools. Alabama's got at least peripheral involvement. Alabama feels like that they did what was necessary. That Toby Baker's not still around. Yasir Roseman, whose name came up, in a weird context, in a context that he didn't get anything. But he's no longer on the staff, and so they feel comfortable that they can move forward. But I think everybody who's involved wants to see some sort of action and have some idea on what it's going to be going forward. Because if you just, and again, I'm not the judge and jury on LSU, but let's just say that it doesn't. The optics aren't great. But if nothing happens, if you can just be brazen about it, then what are you going to do if you're competing against them? And you gotta win games too. And you don't see any repercussions for acting however you want to act on the recruiting trail. So it's an interesting question.
You mentioned Jahvon Quinerly coming in from Villanova to this Alabama men's basketball program. Obviously, he's applying for a waiver based on what we just talked about. Some of the mention that involved Quinerly in the FBI investigation into college basketball. What is your sort of expectation at this point, just knowing what you know in terms of Quinerly's involvement, immediate, down the road? What do you kind of envision there, Cecil?
Well, I think what the family will do and the institution certainly will support is in order to get a waiver, under those situations, you need to show a hardship. And so what he will do is contend that he never took anything from Book Richardson, that his name was wrongly brought into the scheme, that Book Richardson, who's the assistant in Arizona, pocketed the money or never got the money or whatever it may be, but that it created such an atmosphere around him when he decommitted from Arizona and went to Villanova that he couldn't be successful at Villanova, and that was the hardship. So whether the NCAA will accept that argument or not, I don't know. That's actually consistent with what the Feds were arguing, which were that these schools were being defrauded and that these players were being taken advantage of. Fraud was committed. So, again, it's all new territory, Travis. I can't predict. But that's what they'll contend the hardship was, that the hardship came from an atmosphere, everything surrounding Jahvon at Villanova, which is not accused of doing anything illegal, by the way, but everything surrounding him at Villanova that arose from that made it impossible for him to succeed, and so he needed to transfer. He had a hardship that forced him to transfer, and he should be immediately eligible.
On the floor, Cecil, if nothing else, is this some nice Kyra Lewis insurance? Should Kyra Lewis come out after the 2019-2020 season in having a guy like Quinerly as a part of the program for what you would think to be for sure 2 years down the road?
I would think so. I would think that gives you a kid that had McDonald's All-America ability, that seems to have a skill set that goes with what Nate wants to do. I think Nate Oates likes to have more than one, doesn't mind playing more than one point guard. Certainly likes to have point guards available, but we'll put them both on the floor at the same time. If Jahvon's waiver is granted, then I wouldn't be surprised to see them both play. If it's next year, I wouldn't be surprised to see Alabama recruit another point guard to go with Quinerly. So yes, it's a good fit from that standpoint.
Cecil, something else we heard about from the SEC spring meetings was alcohol in SEC venues.
Beer and wine.
Beer and wine, to be clear. This isn't Papa John's Stadium up in Louisville where you can get country cocktails, for crying out loud. Just a matter of time, right? I mean, we had been hearing about this for a couple of years now. Alabama's stance on it, at least initially, did that strike you any way as a surprise, non-surprise?
No, I don't think Alabama was one of the institutions. LSU was in the forefront of this, and I think they had some pretty good support from Texas A&M, from what I understand. There'll be a balance there for Alabama. I don't want to speak for anybody, and I certainly don't want to speak for a policy that probably hasn't been made yet. I doubt you'll see it at football next year. I think they were pretty clear about that. Beyond that, further down the road, either at another venue besides Bryant-Denny Stadium, I think that's a possibility. In 2 or 3 years, when some other schools have had a chance to look at it and see which direction it goes, then you might see it at Bryant-Denny. And people talk about the unavoidable pun about a stream, but about a revenue stream, and it would be. But they're also selling skyboxes and zone and luxury suite where you can have all those things. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's an amenity that they want to keep a premium on. I don't know that anybody would say, why do I need a skybox when I can drink my beer in peace in section JJ? But I think you got to look at all of that. But I think that's going to take more of a look than 3 months.
From the Deontay Wilder perspective Saturday night, Cecil, with Andy Ruiz shocking Anthony Joshua in the heavyweight title bout there in New York City, was Deontay a winner in that, a loser in that, or somewhere in between?
Well, they're set up nicely in that they had announced. It's funny that they announced the Fury fight the day before, Fury 2, Wilder Fury 2, because that's, I guess, really the biggest fight. You would say short term, you'd say a loser. You won't have 2 undefeated heavyweights for whatever value that is. If the Joshua Ruiz rematch is next, then who knows? By the time Deontay gets around to fighting them, whether it'll be Joshua or Ruiz. If Joshua comes back, beats him, looks good, regains the belt, it's still a big fight. But I don't think there's any way that it doesn't take a little bit of the luster off of that fight. Doesn't mean Deontay still can't have a path where he makes a lot of money fighting these guys, and it puts Ruiz in the picture. Certainly, if he can win the rematch, then I don't know what Joshua does. But Vegas would make, I think, Joshua a big favorite in a rematch with Ruiz. So I would say, in some ways, that's a loss. In other ways, the more people talk about the heavyweight division, the more interest there is, the more action. And I'll be honest, there's more talk about the heavyweight division right now than I can remember in 10 or 12 years. So that's good for Deontay. And Showtime, which is really involved in a lot of his promotions, and it may be Showtime / ESPN before it's over. So what Deontay needs to do with his rematch coming up with Ortiz, is be well aware you don't want a Ruiz situation happening if you're Deontay. Then it really hurts. You lose your belts and so forth. So it'll be interesting. I guess Fury fights in a couple of weeks, next week, 2 weeks. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. And Tyson will stir it up now. Tyson, as they say in the other squared circle sport, Tyson's great on the mic. He can cut a promo. So we'll see how that all goes. I still think the best case scenario was undefeated Wilder versus undefeated Joshua in a unification fight, but they'll work these things out.
Yeah, I guess, Cecil, if nothing else, this might speed up Joshua Wilder, might it? Because if Joshua takes care of Ruiz in the rematch, and obviously Deontay's got big work in front of him down the road with Fury, this could maybe speed up Wilder and Joshua, because Joshua's not the needle mover after Saturday night that he was, right?
No, and he just can't. You can't roll those dice again. Say you beat Ruiz in a rematch, but you can't turn around and fight another lesser-known contender. Because what if you lose again? What if the same thing happens? You can't risk. Then you're really gambling millions of dollars. So I think that's a good observation, that it can speed things up.
Speaking of millions of dollars, Cecil, we're talking with Cecil Hurt of the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com on SFS, presented by Mercedes-Benz of Tuscaloosa. James Holzhauer walks away from Jeopardy just shy of $2.5 million in earnings. That got us to talking about favorite game shows today on the program. Cecil Hurt's number one game show of all time. Let's hear it.
I don't know. I still keep wondering if James could have beaten Rosie Lopez on White Men Can't Jump. Because she was, when she
Rosie was tough.
That would have been. I'd have tuned in for that one. I don't know. I remember I hadn't watched game shows in a long time. Dick Clark with the $10,000 pyramid,
great,
$25,000. Match Game was always good. There was, when I was a kid, there was more going on in Match Game than I realized when I was a kid. little innuendo. Paul Wind in the Hollywood Squares, same thing.
Oh yeah.
You'd think he was funny. I didn't get the whole subtext that they had going on right there in America's living rooms. All those shows were fun though. They were all fun. I was never a big Price is Right guy for some reason. Nothing against it. It just wasn't must-see TV for me to get up in the morning and watch much Price is Right. Word games, as you can imagine, word games. $10,000 pyramid or pass. I don't know if you remember Password. Those kind of games were always good.
What about Cecil Hurt on Jeopardy? What do we got to do to make that happen, Cecil? I think you got a little run in you if we could get you on there.
Well, we'll see. I don't know. I couldn't do as well as Jack. So I'll guarantee you that he had it. Apparently, I haven't seen it, but he apparently had it dialed in. It was apparently a likable character and got a lot of buzz. But I still want to see him and Rosie head to head from one of the underrated movies from the 90s, White Men Can't Jump.
Great flick. Wesley Snipes, Woody.
Wesley Snipes and Woody, man. Woody.
Yeah. Wesley and Woody. What a combination.
Woody kind of he's not quite a Pete Merritt, maybe kind of a Marshall Henderson guy, a little bit. Jason Williams without all the tattoos.
I think Woody's character would qualify. That's back when the Reeboks, you could pump them up, Cecil. Remember those?
Sure,
pump up those basketball shoes.
Yeah, that little pump would work about 3 times. Fall apart.
Yeah, guys showing up at the ER with broken ankles just couldn't understand it. They had them pumped. What in the world?
I've always been a Chuck Taylor guy myself.
Might as well be for ankle support.
There you go, the high top Chuck Taylor.
Absolutely. Biggest thing I'm jealous of with James, Jeopardy James, is that, Cecil, he gets to legitimately call himself a professional gambler. I don't know if there's a better job title in the world than professional handicapper or professional gambler, Cecil. Can you think of one? Maybe
People
president of the
are
United States.
in that business, Brent Musburger. I think that's what Brent is now.
Mm-hmm. Ace Rothstein.
Ace Rothstein. You know, going all the way back to we're in the 100th year of the Black Sox scandal.
Oof.
So it's one of America's older professions. And if you're good, you're good. You know, the professionals, I guess, are guys that can claim it on their taxes, live in Nevada, and
that's right,
claim it on their taxes. But you know that back home in Jacksonville, I don't know what the country club is, but you know there's a guy that he hangs around the 19th hole. He gets in a little foursome, and he's doing the same thing, just a different scale.
Cecil, I can tell you, Hyde Park Golf Club on the west side of Jacksonville, when I was 12 years old, I might have actually played in some games with that guy. Now, I wasn't involved in the gambling, but they would let me play along. I got a real education back then, Cecil, in the preteen years.
Those guys, again, if you don't know who the mark in the group is, probably you.
And when they weren't playing in the Friday game, they were at the card table. I can tell you that much.
Card table, absolutely. Doing a little of that. So, you know, hustle never sleeps, Trav.